BMW Motorcycle Owners of America present the Short Wheelbase Podcast. With members in all 50 states, Canada, and across the globe, the BMW MOA invites you to ride inspired. Learn more about membership benefits, including roadside assistance, tire hazard protection, and more at bmwmoa.org. The Short Wheelbase Podcast is also brought to you by Boxer 2 Valve, supplier of quality OEM and aftermarket parts and specialty tools, and by Air Support BMW, offering premium driveline rebuilding and performance enhancements for your air-cooled BMW.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Short Wheelbase Podcast, episode 13. I have a slight change of locale this week. I'm in my home office and not in the garage. More on that in a minute.
Yeah, I was going to say, it looks like you're in a garden store.
Yeah. There's some lovely plants. There's probably going to be a dog walking behind me at some point.
Fair enough.
And it is incredibly windy here today. So if you hear what sounds like a tornado, I'm fine. It's just the Colorado wind.
Okay.
I'm a little bit more shielded from that in the garage, but not in the office. Anyway, Daren, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I was rambling on about myself there.
We got to get to talking bikes, Nick. That's why we're here.
Exactly. So yeah, this week we're going to go through some garage updates as always. The main focus of the episode this week is going to be on a Survivor Series bike from your website, Daren.
Mm-hmm.
It's an R90 Slash Six. We're going to talk a little bit about that, as well as you did an interview with the actual owner of that bike.
With Kevin, yep.
And the story of how he came to buy it, which is
It's a good one.
Awesome story.
It's a good one.
But before that, I'll lead off the garage updates, which also explains why I'm in the house and not in my garage.
All right.
I mentioned last episode I was going to be diving into a major suspension project on my 4Runner, and that project has ballooned out of scope.
Shocking.
Shocking is exactly why, because I am replacing shocks, and I discovered torn CV boots while I was in there, and so now the entire front end is scattered throughout my entire garage, and that's why I'm inside. It's also blocking me from doing any bike work. So I'm going to hand it over to you to cover the bike chat.
Garage update. Yes. All right. From the Ozarks, my garage update, two things. So last episode, I believe we were talking about an issue I was having with the clock.
Right.
And without going over the histrionics with the whole thing, what was going on there, the short of it was I had everything wired up to a Centec fuse blocks and also a relay with the Centec, so everything was on switch power.
Right.
And what was happening was I would disconnect the ground at the transmission bolt, and the clock was still running. And it was strange. Anyway, so you're not going to believe what the issue was. This is pretty crazy.
I'm curious to hear.
You ready?
Yeah.
I hooked it up wrong, Nick. That's what happened.
I mean, I wasn't going to guess that, but
in my defense, the instructions from Centec were just sort of printed in black and white, and it showed, wire to here, relay, battery, hot lead, all sorts of different ways. Somehow I interpreted it that essentially what I did was I had hooked one of the ground wires directly to the negative terminal on the battery, which would explain why it was running all the time.
There we go.
So, yeah. Stupid mistake. Mistake.
That's all right though, because it was a lot easier to fix than a not stupid mistake, right?
But what I will say, in my defense, it was peculiar that I could leave the bike like that untouched and the clock wouldn't run. Then if I touched it, somehow it decided to run. But
that's what's still making me scratch my head a little bit.
It was weird. But suffice to say, I moved the one of the ground wires off of the negative terminal onto a ground spot on the frame. All good.
Nice.
So which reminds me, I need to call or send a note to Charles, who I sold the R100S to, because I think that's hooked up the same way. So, Charles, if you're listening, take note of what I did, but I'll be following up with an email here. I've been meaning to do that to tell you. So,
very good.
Yes. Other bit of news is the R100S, the 77S, number 3.
Right.
Yes, I found on eBay, this is pretty neat, a new old stock set of Coney shocks. So period correct shocks for that era bike.
Wow. I didn't think you could find those anymore.
New in the box.
Yeah.
With the decals, instructions, all kinds of stuff. Pretty good price. I think I got them for under $200 and sent them off to a friend in the Pacific Northwest who rebuilds these. Sort of on the side, kind of a friends only thing. He's done a few sets for me. So got those new NOS Connies on there. Boy, they look good, and want an upgrade from the original stock shocks that were on there. You know, I've noticed this, Nick, about stock shocks on these older bikes from the 70s. For some reason, again, this is sort of anecdotal, and this may go along with me trying to explain why the clock was acting funny, but the Slash 6 series shocks, so on the Green Machine and on my R90S, those are still original shocks, and they're okay. But all the later models I've got, the Slash 7s, all these 100Ss, the stock shocks on there are like pogo sticks. So I don't know why that is, but I've just noticed the ones on the R78RS I had, all the 77Ss I've had, all those stock shocks, they're absolutely horrible. I mean, you just can't, you sit on it and it's pretty bad. So anyway, kudos to my friend Gage out there in the Pacific Northwest who hooked me up with the rebuild on those. So that's all good. And the Green Machine, Nick, the final thing I'll say about this, I got about 60, I have to talk in kilometers on this. I always forget. 60 kilometers on it the other weekend. Nothing blew up, no smoke coming out of the headlights. So looks like you're going to be all set. You'll be on that bike riding it to the National Rally this year.
Yep. I guess we're letting the world know that at this point. Yeah. Yes. So I will be meeting Daren and riding that bike from Memphis to the BMW MOA Rally. And I'm excited to ride that bike. I've always loved that green.
Yes. So all of you are tuned in and listening. You've heard me bemoan some of the issues and things with that bike. You'll be able to see it in person at the rally, and we'll do a little podcast episode when you and I meet up in Memphis about that.
Yep.
And what might be fun is what I'll try to do is write down a list of all the things that are wrong on that bike, and see, you can just maybe put it in your pocket or something, and conversationally you can just say, hey, see how many of these things you can find on the bike.
That would be fun. Yeah.
Some of them are kind of hidden, some of them are obvious,
and it'll be interesting because I spoke recently with one of the other podcasters with the MOA, Wes, and he's riding his R90 Slash Six to the rally as well.
Oh, good.
So I'm planning to get some photos of the two bikes together, and I'm curious if he'll be able to pick out what's wrong with yours.
Yeah, well, I won't say anything about it. We've talked about a few things, but we'll just leave it at that, and I'll give you the embarrassingly exhaustive list of what was wrong with that. So
very cool.
There you go.
As you know, I'm a lover of the misfits, so I'm happy to ride a bike with things that are wrong with it, as long as it works.
Yeah. Well, I will say it came out, it looks good. Everything's fine on it mechanically. Everything's sound. You know, I went through it all with a fine tooth comb, but it's just a lot of those things. If you didn't know what you're looking at, you might not catch it.
Right. Very cool. Awesome. Well, I look forward to hopping on that bike and putting some kilometers on it.
That's right. Well said.
Well, speaking of R90 Slash Sixes, that is our Survivor Series bike for this week. That's the featured bike. The gentleman that you met up with and spoke to, his name is Kevin. I'm going to kind of let you introduce this, and we're probably just going to roll right into the interview that you did with him. But I'll kind of let you give the background on kind of how you found this guy and how he found this bike.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So before we get into the audio part of the podcast, maybe I can just say now, maybe while I'm talking here a little bit, you can toss up a few pictures of the motorcycle. Yeah. So this is our second Boldor Red. Am I pronouncing that right?
That's how I've always said it. I don't know if it's right or not.
I looked up the pronunciation the other day, as a matter of fact, and I did not know this. Apparently, is it Boldor? It was a race or something in France.
Now I'm going to have to look that up when I'm done.
Yes. Yes, I believe so. Anyway, so this is our second one in the Survivor Series in the Boldor Red color. There's one on the website, though we've not featured it on the podcast here, 75/6 with a small tank in Boldor Red. This one is a R90/6 with the big tank. I'm a fan of the larger tank on these bikes. I like the look on it. Mm-hmm. Although, wouldn't turn down a small tank. And this particular one, we'll maybe see a few photos here. The paint looks really nice on this. Kevin did most of the work on this with the idea that he wanted to get the bike built back up to where it was in the 70s. So he didn't want to do a whole lot of modifications to it. Like a lot of us with these bikes, he sort of likes to ride the period piece, so to speak. So he wasn't concerned about brake upgrades or, electronic ignition or other things like that. He just wanted to get it back to zero, back to where it was in the mid 70s. I think he did a really good job with it. He's a regular listener to the program. He sent me an email saying, hey, here's my Survivor Series bike. I read his story about it and I was like, we have got to talk to this guy. So this is a great interview with Kevin. He's in the greater Chicago area. And I'll just introduce it this way and say this involves an alleyway and a 6-pack of Busch Light. Mm-hmm. And we'll leave it at there and we'll roll into this here in just a minute.
Yeah. Before we do, I just wanted to say I think it's a great looking bike. Like you mentioned, I'm a big fan of the big tanks too. I love those knee pads. Yeah. I don't know why. I'm just a sucker for those knee pads, even though they don't really do anything. They just they look great. I like he's got. I know he was trying to get it back to more of an original, but I love that he's got the Husky pipes on it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
which I think are probably the best sounding mufflers you can put on an Airhead. So I'm imagining that bike going down the road and it probably sounds beautiful.
I've never heard those or mounted any in person. How much louder are they than
they're not super loud, which is what I like about them. They just give it a little bit more grunt. I can't put a decibel number on it because I don't know how all that works, but every one that I've seen with those pipes on it doesn't seem obnoxious to me. And I've run the little 18-inch MGO pipes that set off car alarms. So
have you ever run your bike without mufflers?
I don't think I've ever done it without mufflers completely, but I have to imagine it's loud.
It's really loud. I've done it. Sometimes I have neighbors and sometimes the noise over there just gets to where I've got to respond somehow.
You got to let your presence be known.
And I'll just take the mufflers off and ride around. And it's loud. Let's put it that way. I mean, it sounds like a straight pipe Harley.
I bet.
It's kind of fun. But anyway, I didn't know that about the Huskies. I know my friend Upe has a set on a bike, but I've probably seen him in passing in person, but I didn't realize he had those on there.
Yeah, no, I happened to just take a peek at the photos while we were talking there, and I don't know, that's a nice little touch that I like. It's still pretty period correct, might not be original. They're not obnoxious like a lot of mufflers can be. Mm-hmm. I think they're perfect. So looking great.
Yes. Well, Kevin, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for writing. As I said, this is one of the more interesting and fun stories I can certainly relate to with a bike acquisition. And so well done, Kevin. Nick, we'll be seeing you next week, and I guess we'll just roll on to the audio clip.
Just one quick note. If you have a bike that you want to submit to the Survivor Series, just get in touch with Daren through his website. Similarly, airheadmisfits.com, you can submit bikes to me as well for the Misfit bikes that we talk about as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe and enjoy this chat with Kevin. See ya.
We've teamed up with the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America to offer a special membership deal for our listeners. Now, before you think, wait a second, Daren, how much is this going to cost? Let's just stop right here and say it's free. This is a complimentary 1-year digital membership for Airhead 247 podcast listeners. The MOA has a goal of adding 200 new members over the next several months. That's a lot, but I think they can reach that goal with our help. By supporting the MOA with this offer, you are also supporting this program. And let's say this again, it is free of charge. Visit 247.bmwmoa.org and complete the online form using the activation code Airhead247. That's easy to remember. You'll receive your free 1-year digital membership, and that will give our program credit for referring you. Or go to the description section of this podcast. We've got a direct link right there. Membership in the MOA offers discounts at hotels, a monthly magazine, great deals on roadside assistance programs, plus a fantastic network of BMW owners that share your passion. All this, plus you're supporting our efforts here with the podcast, bringing you unique insight into the world of the 247 Airhead. That website, once again, for your free 1-year digital membership, 247.bmwmoa.org. Use the code Airhead247. Thank you very much for your support. We're on the line with Kevin Tabes, and we've got a Survivor Series story for everybody today. Kevin wrote a couple weeks back with a story of his 1975 R90 Slash Six. It's in the Bulldor red color, which, Kevin, interestingly enough, if you looked on the website, we've got another bike of that era. It's a 750 small tank from 1976. So we've got a R90 in this color, and which is yours, and then the one I just referred to. So neat to have two of these bikes of that era in this color. Anyway, you wrote me with a fantastic story about how you came across this bike, and I'm going to just try to set it up and let you roll with it this way. So
Sure.
you, I lived a lot of years in Memphis, Tennessee, and you said you ran into this guy in an alleyway who had his motorcycles in a garage and would be sort of sitting out in his garage drinking a beer. Now, am I sort of getting it right? This might have been an alleyway, like a garbage truck alleyway, like in a city or something where the garbage trucks, so you've got this sort of back alleyway through everybody's backyard. Is that how it was?
Yeah, it's a classic Chicago. It's on a grid system, so every street basically has an alley.
Got it. So you're in Chicago.
And yeah. So it's kind of funny because I'm going to this guitar shop, kind of like you play music too, so you get it. And
yeah.
It's kind of a working man's place. They have all old vintage gear there, but like the tuning knobs were changed or the pickups were changed. Anyways, that's where I met my friend Tom, and I've known Tom for 20 years, and we started talking. I was like, yeah, I've been really interested to get a motorcycle again. And he's like, well, what are you thinking about? I'm like, probably a BMW again. I had a couple back in the 20 years ago, and I loved them. The best. I always joke that BMW stands for best motorcycle in the world.
That's good. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And he's like, well, and Tom's the guy who always knows a guy. He's like, well, I'll tell you what. Right down the street from you, there's this guy Rick that I know, and this guy loves BMWs. He's been collecting, and got a bunch of BMWs. So Tom knew the guy, and so we kind of walked over there one day, made the kind of brief introduction. And he's like a older guy. I don't think he really wanted to be bothered much. As not standoffish, but kind of quiet. Kind of like how you'd imagine like a grandpa would be or something. And then he made the introduction. I was looking around at his bikes. He kind of didn't really say much. And I noticed he was drinking Busch Light. So I went and picked up a pack of Busch Light a couple of days later. And, it's pretty common to walk down an alley with a 6-pack of Busch Light, right? I walked down a couple blocks and walked past. His garage was open. I was like, oh, hey. And I was like, you remember me? I met you the other day, and he's like, yeah. like, hey, you want a beer? And he looked, and it's his beer of choice. It kind of buttered him up that way a little bit,
Smart move.
Yeah. I did that a couple of, maybe 3 or 4 times and got to know him a little bit and started breaking the ice and asking him a lot about himself and what he did with the bikes and how he had so many. I think he was maybe in a BMW club at some point because he had a patch on the back of his vest,
So
jean vest, like a homemade patch.
What was sort of his personal story? Was he retired? Did you find out what he used to do for a living? Was he living there by himself or what?
Yeah. He lived there by himself. His wife passed away, and he was retired, and he didn't really want to ride anymore after his wife passed away. He just kind of hung out in his garage surrounded by his bikes, and he would tinker with them and, keep them running, but never rode them.
Huh.
And he told me about some stories that he would, trips that he would take, and him and his wife. The 2 bikes that he rode where he had the bikes that before he stopped riding were 2/2 conversions with R90S motors in them.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty neat. And, we started talking a little bit, and he was like, oh, and then I rode to Canada. I rode here. I rode across the country. I rode to Mount Rushmore. I rode, to all the motorcycle rallies like Sturgis and Daytona Bike Week, all this stuff, right? And I finally got the courage to say, is any of this stuff for sale? And he's, well, I don't know, maybe, because he was a little hesitant because the bikes that were there at his house in his garage were 2 bikes that were his and his wife's, and he was didn't really want to part with them,
Yeah.
He had a couple other bikes, and he goes, well, I do have a bunch of Slash 2s because he's been collecting parts and all kinds of stuff. So we go and look underneath his porch of his house, and it's like a open deck kind of in the front of his house, but the bottom, like the deck was closed on the bottom, it was like, under his porch. And he probably had 10 Slash 2s all in pieces down there.
Wow.
And he's like, oh, you don't want these. He's like, but I do have 2 other bikes at a garage down the way. And he took me over to his other garage where he had an R100 RT, a 79, and then he had my R90 Slash Six. He's like, I'll sell these, $1,000 a piece. And the funny kind of gets funny here a little bit because my wife told me I'm not allowed to have a bike, and I cannot buy. Well, she said I can't buy a bike. I'm like playing technical here.
Yeah. Could that would maybe mean you could trade for one?
Yeah. So I went to work the next day, and I knew my old boss. He was interested in motorcycles, and I was like, hey, I found this great deal. These bikes are worth money. The guy wants to get rid of them. I can fix these. This is a deal. And he's like, well, I'll tell you what. I'll buy both of them if you fix mine and get it running for me. I was like, great, done deal. So I took the bikes. One day, a couple days later, my boss goes over, pays the guy the money, and then the bikes show up at the garage, and my wife was like, where did these come from? He kept explaining it to. I'm like, well, you didn't say I couldn't have one. You said I couldn't buy one, and I got these for free.
Oh, my God. Kevin, let me just say, I mean, first, I'm loving this story. So you knew enough to buy the Busch Light and take it over to the guy because that's what he was drinking. Then this workaround here with getting the bikes at your house and in the garage, brilliant move number 2. Air Support BMW is a dedicated shop for air-cooled BMW motorcycles, offering high-end restorations and engine blueprinting for all models from World War II through 1995. Air Support offers expert mail-order component repair for transmissions, final drives, carbs, well, anything you can ship, they'll fix it. Air Support uses BMW OEM parts, factory tools, and brings years of experience to each job. And don't worry about shipping to Canada. Shipping rates are affordable and on par with other options. You can follow shop happenings, repairs, bike builds, all of George Thomas's racing exploits on Instagram as well. To schedule your next repair or to find out how George Thomas can help keep your 247 in good order, drop a line or give him a call. It's all there for you at airsupportbmw.com. Boxer2valve.com. Boxer 2 Valve delivers a world-class learning experience with William Plam in their downloadable video series. Get tips and tricks from William's 40-plus years of motorcycle experience in a format you own, commercial-free, with access anywhere, anytime. Each video contains content that's applicable to mechanics of any level, whether you're just starting out or have some experience with the spanners. You'll be able to take away some valuable information to assist you in your project. I know I've mentioned this before, but when I reconditioned my R90S a few years back, I had these videos on my laptop on the workbench. I watched each service sequence before digging into the job. These videos gave me the confidence and assistance I needed to get the 90S back into shape and back on the road. You can find the full listing of downloadable videos for purchase at Boxer2valve.com. That's the number 2, Boxer2valve.com. Let me just ask you, I think you might have mentioned this, but tell me what year this was, because I want it's important, because essentially you paid $2,000 for 2 Airheads in pretty good condition. What year was this?
Oh, it was probably about 8 years ago.
Okay. Well, that's still a killer deal no matter what.
Well, the bikes were completely, my bike hasn't been driven since 1982. That's the last time it was registered.
Okay.
I kind of found out the hard way because it didn't shift into third gear. The transmission was a little messed up.
Uh-oh.
So that wasn't that big of a deal. I sent it to the local, the BMW guru guy here, and he took care of it, and I got it back in a couple weeks, and then it was kind of on me to make the bike run, basically, And because of the way the guy Rick stored the bikes, it was basically cleaning the carburetors, putting fresh oils, a battery and gas in it, and both bikes fired up on the first try.
Isn't that satisfying? I mean, you probably hoped and expected that would happen, but you were probably a little bit surprised too.
I was very surprised, because the other thing too is, I'm a real mechanical person. I work on large commercial and industrial boilers.
Oh, okay.
For 30 years, and if you think about the way any combustion heating system works, right? It's the same as a motorcycle. You need spark, you need a little bit of fuel, and you need some air, right? So I didn't really know about working on the motorcycles that much, but I kind of had myself convinced that I can figure it out. And I stumbled across, after ripping through the internet, I came across Boxer 2 Valve.
Yeah, there you go.
And I watched, and it was kind of perfect, because William was just doing that R90 Slash Six on his YouTube channel.
Same bike you're working on, yeah.
Same exact one, and I followed it step by step, and over the last 7 or 8 years, the bike is really it's been great. And the funny part is, my wife was really mad about it too. And but now it's like she wakes me up in the weekend mornings and she's like, "Hey, where are we going on the bike?"
Oh, that's great. How long did it take her to get over it?
Not too long, honestly. She kind of watched me putz around, and the bike would die out down the block, and I'm like, I'd roll it back to my house and figure out what was wrong and get it going again. And then she'd watch me, and then I started going on longer and longer and longer rides, and she's like, "Well, when are you going to take me?" I'm like, "Well, let's go right now." And it was pretty much, after the first ride, she was in love, and then 8 years later, now she owns her own bike.
Oh, really? Which is what?
She got a Royal Enfield recently.
Oh, okay.
One of the Interceptor 650s.
Yeah, well, those are cool. How is that? Do you like it?
I love it. Yeah. I mean, I'm more of a person. It's just my personal taste, but I prefer more of a bike with mechanical moving parts that I can repair, and that's a little bit more digital.
Yeah. But still, I mean,
electronics and stuff.
It does have a nice classic styling, bit of styling, though. I think.
Oh yeah, I love it. I love English bikes, BSAs and Triumphs and Nortons and stuff like that. I had a couple BSAs and Triumphs, but man, her bike is great. It's awesome.
Wow, that's cool. All right, so I got a few more questions on the R90. So what condition was the paint in? I mentioned at the top it's a Bulldor red. How was the paint?
It's almost like immaculate. There's 2 scratches. There's one scratch on the tank where you can't really see it. It's under behind the forks. Mm-hmm. And then there's a scratch on the front fender and a little scratch on the rear fender. But other than that, it was parked in 1982, and it had a tarp over it and everything, and kept in a conditioned garage. I mean, it's like perfect, you know. It's like an orange color, you know.
Yeah.
Is that old or red? Is it okay?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just looking at some of the stuff you did in the refresh after you got it, and these are things I've done on a couple Slash Sixes I've owned. You might have heard on the program. I just finished up a R75 Slash Six, going through that. But let's see, top end refresh. So you resealed the top end, and did you happen to pull the lifters? Did you check those? I mean, or did you check the valve seats and that kind of stuff, or what was the extent of your top end situation?
Pulling everything out, like basically everything William did on his video, I followed step by step, you know. So it's everything. I put new what are they called? The cam followers in.
Yeah. Yep.
Even though the ones I had, they didn't have any of the pitting on it. I just wanted to do everything, you know, the right way, so I didn't have to worry about the bike, because we go on long trips. Actually, I just sent it out to California. We're going out to do a couple-week tour of California at the end of March. So, yeah, anyways, back to the top of the refresher.
Yeah.
I pulled everything out and just kind of cleaned everything, soaked everything, blew everything out, and just when I had the heads off, I put a little bit of gas, and I plugged the spark plug hole, and then I filled it up with gas and let it sit overnight to see if anything leaked through.
There you go. Now,
nothing leaked through. So
I like the fact you mentioned that you watched William's video. As you know, Boxer 2 Valve has been with us since the beginning as a sponsor. And that particular video series, gosh, that's gotten me through a number of motorcycles. And if anybody listening hasn't seen those, even though he's working on a Slash Six, a vast majority of the services and things he does on those videos apply to a number of different bikes. I mean, sure, you get into a later 80s model or something like that, it's going to be a little bit different, but the basic concepts and skills that you see on there are the same. So I love the fact that you use that video to go through it. I did the same thing. Did you have, like me, your sort of computer on the workbench and have it open? What I would do is I would watch the sequence, go in, do the work, and then go back and watch it again and make sure I didn't do anything right. What was your MO on that? It's basically the same thing. I sat and I probably watched the video about 5 or 6 times, and then I wrote down all the notes and the placement of the rings and all that kind of stuff. And then I brought my computer into the garage, set it up on my bench, and then I would just go step by step, exactly what he did. And then I'd play it again and do the other side. And it worked out. So yeah. Now, did you any surprises when you were going through the bike? Did you see any? What was the fella's name again you bought it from? I want to make sure we get this right.
His name was Rick.
Okay.
And I'm afraid to maybe mention his last name.
No, that's okay. That's fine. So did you notice anything on there that any shortcuts or questionable things Rick did, or when you were going through all those services and parts on the bike, did he do a good job? No surprises?
The guy was very particular about everything.
Wow.
You know? When I was asking him some questions, and he was, if you don't do it like this, it's not going to work, and don't listen to what the book says. Refer to this manual and not that manual. Here's a book from Bing, so follow this book, not the manual. He was very, very specific about everything. Unlike a Slash 5 that I had a long time ago, I bought it, it was about 3 hours away from Chicago. I drove on a winter night out to go pick it up. I drove it home on one cylinder in the middle of the, it was dark. It was 30 degrees outside. And when I pulled the petcocks, there was like cork in there to stop the fuel. It was,
oh, Lord.
The R90, no surprise. I mean, everything, I probably didn't even have to do the top end refresh. It's just a little bit of weeping from the push rod tubes.
Yeah.
From the steels. So leaking stuff drives me crazy.
I get it totally. And, there's a couple, people go about this different ways. Kevin, you and I are kind of in the same category. You buy a bike that's new to you, you're going to get it in the garage. Guys like you and me are going to pretty much go over the whole thing and refresh what we want to, so we can get all of the deferred maintenance and everything sort of back to zero, so we know where we're at. Other guys will buy a bike and just repair it as needed. And that's fine too. They're not, a leaky seal, push rod seal isn't going to bother you. It's not going to, keep you from riding the bike.
Yeah.
So, there's a couple ways to go about it, but I appreciate what you did there. So what was the mileage on the bike when you bought it?
It was like 21,000, I think, when I got it.
Good grief. Wow.
Yeah. And now it has around 37.
Good for you. And any issues with the speedometer, tachometer, all that stuff working good?
Oh, yeah. All that stuff works good. And I, replaced on the cluster, I replaced the lights, and I took all that stuff out and greased everything because the speedometer, the odometer wasn't working for a couple miles. And I pulled out the plug on the back, the little, the screw with the pin in it, the nut with the pin, and just greased it up and put everything back together and started working again. So, yeah, everything, the cluster. I mean, the only thing that didn't work was the turn signals. The actual lights would flash, but on the cluster, the light wouldn't flash.
Huh.
So I took the relay apart and cleaned the relay with some deoxit and just cleaned all the points and the contacts on there and put it back together, and it's been working great. Bingo.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
So so you've got some other bikes, some other Airheads still, 81 R100 RT, a 79 R100 RT, and a 71 75/5. So impressive.
I had those. Those are gone.
Oh, those are the ones that are gone. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So this is the one Airhead in your lineup now.
I have a Slash 2. I have a 67.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So tell me then, well, I can still ask the same question. How does this Slash 6 compare to those other bikes that you've owned, sort of performance wise, and how you get along with it? But secondarily, part of that question, how does this Slash 6 sort of, how is it emotionally grabbed you maybe in that those other bikes didn't?
There was something special about sitting on it, like the placement of the seats, the handlebars, the width of the handlebars, as much like rise and kickback as they have.
Mm-hmm.
Like as soon as I sat on it, I was like, "This is my bike." It was one of those things, It just happened. It stole my heart immediately. Once I started it up and drove it down the alley for the first time, I was like, "Wow, like this is it."
Yeah,
I kind of knew it,
Yeah.
As far as like compared to other bikes. The R100s, I love them, but there's just like they were maybe a little like I'm 6 foot, right? So with the 32-inch inseam, so the R100s were just a little bit leaned forward for me, and I know I could have probably changed the bars and everything would have been fine. But and the R75/5, I like that bike a lot too, but it was just I need a little bit of money. I had the bike; it was a perfect bike, and I had to part with it, unfortunately,
Hey, that's the way it goes. We've all been there.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, you've owned a lot of different Airheads, and so you've got a lot to compare to here. You've been riding them for a long time. My take on the R90/6 is, of that era, mid 70s /6/7. The thing I think I like about the R90 is it's got a little more get up and go, a little more gusto than a 750, which I've got a 750/6, but I've ridden a lot of R90s. It's not as expensive as a R90S. And I think the engine is a little bit easier to get along with, the way it's with the gearing and the displacement and all that kind of stuff. It's a little more manageable for backroads riding than a R100/7. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with the R100/7. I own one. I've owned them. But the smaller displacement engines, especially if you're doing backroad riding, like in third, it seems like you can just kind of stay in third gear and not even worry about it. And the R90 really fits that category well.
It does. It's perfect. It's like the bike is big enough to, take a 2,000-mile trip and pack it up, but it's small enough where you can ride around in the city and be comfortable. You can still get through and lane split if you have to. And it's very manageable. It's pretty agile.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, what a great story. Like I said, I love the fact somebody sort of tipped you off on this guy. You had the wherewithal to, bring over a 6-pack of beer. I mean, if that's not an icebreaker, I don't know what. I'd let you in the garage. If I'm not a Busch Light drinker, but I'd still let you in the garage if you had a 6-pack of Busch Light. I wouldn't.
Sure. Well, send your address and the type of beer. Like, I'll show up one day.
Let me ask you before we get off the phone. So you're where are you in Chicago proper, suburbs? Whereabouts?
I'm in Chicago proper, just a little bit north. I'm in the city, but just on the northwest side.
Okay. Just let me ask you, since we're on the phone, what's the riding like there? Do you? I was talking with somebody the other night about riding in an urban environment. I lived in Memphis for a while, and I was saying, one thing I used to try to do was I'd either get up and ride early Sunday mornings, because when I was in Memphis, everybody was in church. So the roads were open, and I was out with the other sinners. Or I would go out at night, a little bit later at night, or super early in the morning or something like that. So how do you get an urban ride in? What's your MO on that?
Well, I'm there's a couple neighborhoods over, and then you're out of the city.
Oh, okay.
From my house. So it's about, probably 10 minutes until the roads kind of start turning open. And I know a couple of routes that take you through like forest preserves that are pretty, no traffic really.
Yeah.
And then once you get beyond those, then you start to get into like more like farmlands and kind of more open roads.
All right.
Within 40 minutes, you can be in Wisconsin. And that's what I love to do is I drive up to Wisconsin. I turn my GPS off and all this stuff. And you just get lost on those farm roads and zigzagging around for hours. And, there was several times where I left work at 2:00 on a Friday and came home at 6 a.m. It's like, well, I had no idea what gone that was.
I love it. All right.
Yeah.
Last question for you, and thanks for taking some time to visit, and thanks for writing.
Honor, honestly. Thank you.
Really glad you wrote in. What's on tap for this bike? Any plans to, I don't know, maybe get some different saddlebags, electronic ignition, any modifications, upgrades you're thinking about, or you're just going to ride it until it needs something?
That's it's funny. Yes, Ed. Like I love the bike the way it is. Like a lot of people upgrade their brakes. And, it doesn't stop good, right? We need electronic ignition. I don't believe in any of that stuff really. Maybe I'm not going to have a lot of people. Well, a lot of people disagreeing with that, but the bike was made a certain way for a certain era, and I really enjoy that. So, I ride it for what it was made. I'm not trying to. If I want a Hayabusa, I'd go buy one, I guess, right? Like if I wanted handling and speed and brakes, I love the BMW. So, really, I just want to keep it the way it is. No electronic ignition, no upgrades, no nothing. But no, I want to keep it as original as possible always, because that's why I love the bike so much, because it's all mechanical and it's all stuff you can pretty much fix on the side of the road if it breaks.
Kevin, I'm impressed. I approve of everything you said, and I think that's why you enjoy listening to the podcast. You and I are of like mind on a lot of these things. So great job, buddy. Appreciate the time today.
Oh man, it was a real pleasure, and thank you. It was a real honor, honestly, all the people you interview, and it's thanks for all your help and your knowledge and doing what you do. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us on the Short Wheelbase Podcast, presented by the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America. To join the club, visit bmwmoa.org. You can find full-length episodes of the excerpts heard here on the Airhead 247 podcast. The Short Wheelbase Podcast is produced and edited by Nick Malozzi. Audio segments by Jeff Glover. You can check in with Nick at Airhead Misfits on Instagram.